Yeah. We have another sermon on our very long series. This is actually our fourth sermon in this series of his story. We went over Adam and Eve, and then we went over Cain and Abel. The last one we went over Noah. Now we're getting into Abraham. This week we'll be talking about Abraham. Abraham's actually a little bit of a long story, and we're breaking it down into 4 different sections. We're going to have the story just basically on Abraham today, and then we're going to look at Sarah, Hagar, and Ishmael, and then we're going to look at the story of Lot, and then we're going to finish off with the story of Abraham and Isaac. And then from there we get into a long book of Joseph, which we're going to try to condense down. And from this period on, our sermons itself, on the books and the stories within themselves, we're going to be touching base on a lot of long stories, as we did with Abraham here, but we'll also do Jacob and Esau before we get to Joseph. And then Joseph will be a long story, and then after Joseph comes Moses, which is another long story. So for some time, it's going to be trying to condense these down into the sermons, but I'm not going to kind of waste your time here with this. We're going to recap. Let me put my eyeballs on. Oh my, I should have cleaned these. But we're going to recap the that we've already been through to kind of catch us up to where we need to be. So while we get ready to do this recap, we're going to be touching base in Genesis. We're going to be coming through a couple of different things, but we're going to start in 12. Eve, his story revolves around his desire to establish a relationship with his creation. In the story of Cain, we've seen grace and mercy. In the story of Noah, we see God shines through his relentless pursuit to fulfill his covenant by always making a way. In today's story, we're going to see God's loyalty to his covenantal love to those who are willing to. So today's story, I want to really look at God's promises. So our first mention of God's promises is found in Genesis 12, 1-3. So let's read. Now the Lord said to Abram, from your family, from your father's house. I'm going to stop there for a second. The Lord's telling him to get away from his family, away from his father's house, out of our comfort zones. The Lord is calling us to get away from our people, our friends, so he can do something magnificent in our lives. But I want to touch base on that because we're going to touch base on that in a few minutes. And then he says, to a land I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. And you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now this is the promise that God's given. The only thing is, as we jump into the next one, which starts in verse 4, it says, so Abraham departed as the Lord has spoken. So right here, it looks like Abraham's being obedient. God's telling him to leave his home, his father's house, and go. Abraham went. However, right next to it, it says, and I went with him. So Abraham didn't get away from his family. But some can argue the point that Lot is part of his family, his immediate family. Lot was his brother's son, and his brother passed away, so Abraham kind of took over. So we're going to leave that hanging there for a second. And Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Then Abram took Sarah, his wife, and then it says it again, and Lot, his brother's son, and all their possessions that they have gathered, and the people whom they have bought in Haran. So Abraham didn't leave by himself. Abraham didn't leave with just him and his wife. They took everybody, the whole entourage. And they departed to go to the land of Canaan. So they came to the land of Canaan. Abraham passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh. and the Canaanites were then in the land. I want to touch base on a couple things as God works through us. God wants us to leave the areas that we are in to go so he can do something magnificent in our life. He wants us to listen to him and get out of our comfort zone. And here we see that Abraham had an old familiar. He had his country, he had his family, he had his home, and he was living in a foreign land. But God's calling him out to a new familiar. He says, I will make you something better. Abraham had to get out of his old comfort. He settled. And as we do, we settle for things. Instead of getting up and doing better, we settle. We accept what we have and where we are at. But God wanted new comfort to Abraham. He said, I will bless you and make your name great and make you a blessing. Also, our safety. Abraham had an old safety. He was guarded by his own efforts, by his own ways. And so true that we are the same way. We create our own safety. We handle our own business. But God wanted new safety. And that safety was protection through God. As well as old family. Abraham was with his father, and in those times, family was large. Family that lived together was large. And Abraham was suited and accepted and comfortable with his family, but he had to be pulled out of that in order to be given a new family. And that's God provided family. And as Christians, we are sitting with family. Some of our family we may not even like, but some of them we're pretty close to. And when we came and accepted Christ in our life, it seems like there's a little barrier with that family now, because we're on a different path. And we can't associate with some of the things that they do. It doesn't mean that we don't associate with them. It's just not as easy no more. But it's a lot easier because we're going to church and we're creating new brethren from the church body that we can actually relate to. And it's a transition from the old family to the new. So we're going to continue on with the story. Verse 10 says, now there was a famine in the land. I want to just point out this could be a circumstance in people's lives, famine, a circumstance in our life, or this could be a testament. And Abraham went down to Egypt to dwell there. And the famine was severe. Sometimes we just do things in the flesh. Without waiting for God to tell us what to do, we just see a famine, we see a circumstance, and we try to avoid it. And that's what we're seeing here. And it came to pass, when he was close to entering Egypt, that he said to Sarai, his wife, indeed, I know that you are a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore it will happen when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say you are my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. So Abraham already knows that there's going to be trouble. So he scoops up a plan, and some people may say it's a lie, but it's not really a lie, but he scoops up a plan to try to fix the issue. Nowhere along this line did God say, there's a famine, I want you to go to Egypt. This is something that Abraham decided to do. Now as he's on his way to Egypt, he understands that there's going to be an issue. We got to fix the issue. So now he's trying to fix that issue. So it continues. So it was when Abram came into Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very beautiful. The princes of Pharaoh also saw her and commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. He treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels. So everything that Abraham is trying to fix and provide from the flesh seems to be working. But here's where God fixes it. Because the very next verse it says, but the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abram's wife. And we're going to find out why he did this. Because it says, and Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister? So why did God do this? Because this next verse, I might have taken her as my wife. God's plan was for Sarai to be the seed bearer of the covenant. So there's no way God could allow an Egyptian to touch her in any type of way. But this was what Abraham's plan would be. And the result of that plan was going to end up in chaos until God stepped in. And sometimes we think we're planning things and we're moving right along, and we think we're getting this, God's got our back, and then circumstances hit. Chaos hits in our life. And we don't understand why. It's because God is stopping us from harm. Not harm from ourselves, but harm for the purpose that God has in our life. So we're going to jump to Genesis 20 real quick. I think I have this on a slide. And it says, this is the part where Abraham asked Sarah to tell Pharaoh that she's his sister, not his wife. In verse 20 we see, but indeed she is truly my sister. She is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. And she became my wife. So Sarah was his sister, half-sister, but she became his wife. So there wasn't literally a lie. It was just kind of tweaking the whole purpose there. So we'll move on. It says, now therefore, here's your wife. Take her and go your way. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. Now as we jump to Genesis chapter 13, talks about Abraham inherits the land of Canaan. Let me get situated here. Yep. Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and of course the name of him to the south. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. I want to paint a picture right here. Abraham's headed back, and he gets back to the land. And he goes back to where he first was. And he didn't just go back to the area he first was. He went back to the same spot he called on the Lord before, and that's where he called on the Lord again. Sometimes when we drift, sometimes when we go an opposite direction, the only way back to the Lord is where we last seen the Lord. Whether it was through Bible study, whether it was through attending church, whatever it was that you felt spirit, you need to go back. The last place you felt his presence, that's where you go back to. So it says, Lot also went with Abram, had flocks and herds, and tents. Now the land was not able to support them, that they might dwell together. They were separated that they might dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. So here we see that God takes the thorn that was been in Abram's side this whole time. He's going to separate them. And why I'm saying lots of thorn is because he was dragging, he was multiplying, and it was causing strife. Maybe it doesn't seem to be in the scripture. You do see that it's been an issue. And we're going to see that it's going to continue to be an issue even after they're separated. So Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, go to the right, then I will go to the left. Now here it says, isn't the whole land before us? So why are they so condensed in one area that they're fighting? Couldn't they spread out a little bit more? Still been in one camp? God's trying to show us something in here. It's not about the campment. It's about going our own ways. Somebody's heart's in a different direction. And we will see that. So God's promise, the second mention, is in Genesis 13, verses 14 through 18. We'll get ready to read that. And the Lord said to Abram, after Lot has separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which I see I give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. God gave him this promise when? After him and Lot separated. And his promise wasn't to his family, it was to him and his descendants. So it says, then Abraham moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there to the Lord. Now we're going to skip right to Genesis chapter 15. And what we're skipping over is Abraham meets Lot. With Lot, they separated. We're going to see that story later. He has an issue with Lot. He goes into battles and he captures Lot back because kings of the south, whatever, came in to Sodom and captured all the people and took Lot captive. So Abram builds up his little army, goes out there, and they capture everything and all the booty and stuff. So at the end of this, King Melchizedek comes up, and Abraham gives him a tenth of everything because Melchizedek is a picture of Christ. So at this point in time, we have all this happening. So the king of Sodom comes up and he tells Abraham, he says, you can keep whatever you do. And Abraham, I don't want nothing. I don't want nothing from it. I don't want nobody to say that they helped me get to where I'm going. Only God is my providence. And how true can we get to that spot sometimes? That we can allow that anything that people want to give us for a service, for this and for that, and we can say, whoa, I don't need that. Abraham said, let all his men pick out their goods. But for Abraham himself, he didn't want nothing to do with it. So now we get to this. After these things, after that, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision saying, do not be afraid. Why would Abraham be afraid? He just had a war with a whole bunch of kings who could rise up and come right after him again. But God says, do not be afraid. I am your shield. I am your protection. But then everything that Abraham just gave up, the rewards, God says, your exceedingly great reward. I am your shield and your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me? What will you give me? After all I've done and obeyed, what will you give me? Seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus. Then Abram said, look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this one shall be not be your heir, but one will come from your own body, shall be your heir. Then he brought him outside and said, look now toward heaven and count the stars, if you are able to number them. And he said to him, so shall. 15:6 finishes this off, and he said, and he believed in the Lord, and he counted him to him for righteousness. Abraham had not had many. Abraham hasn't even had one. Things and all this stuff that's happening, Abraham finally got to the point where he's like, look, I'm hearing you. I understand. I'm trying to trust you. But I don't even have one descendant. How can I be having multiple descendants? How can they be numbered of the dust and the sand and the stars of the sky? I don't even have one. The only thing I have is the one that was born in my house. That's not even mine. He had a good question, and he had a right to ask it. But at this point, it says that he still believed in the Lord, And the Lord accounted him righteous over that. So God's promise, the third mention, is Genesis 15:12 through 21. And it says, "Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him." Now before I go through with this, I want to say right before this, God told Abraham to take the carcasses and slaughter some animals, take the carcasses, lay them, cut them in half and lay them aside. This is the way that they used to sign contracts back then. They would lay the carcasses out, and then the two that needed to sign the contract together would walk together through the blood of the carcass. That's also where it came out to where blood signed the covenants and stuff, the contracts. So we see that here. Now, since you got that picture in mind, then it said, "Then he said to Abram, now certainly your descendants will be strangers in the land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and will go and will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation who they serve, I will judge. Afterward, they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your father in peace. You shall be buried at an old age. But in the fourth generation, they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete." So God told Abraham and is going to be taken out. They're going to be leaving out of this land. They're going to go to a foreign land. They're going to be slaves. But when the time is right, they're going to come out of there with great possessions back to this land. And why does all this happen? Because God needs to prepare this land for them. Because the iniquity is complete. So God had to take care of that issue first. So here's the part I wanted to show you. "And it came to pass, when the sun went down and it was dark, a oven, one, burning torch, that's two, that passed the cartridges. On the same day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your descendants I have given this land." Abraham waking up, and what he's waking up to is this burning oven and flaming torch, walking and sealing that covenant. There's two, the burning oven and the flaming torch. God alone signed that covenant for the both of them. Why did he do that? Because Abraham would have never in the flesh been able to keep it apart. So God did the deal. This is also another thing you really look at as when he sent Jesus Christ here to finally seal the deal. It was God that had to do it. No man could be righteous. No man could live a sinfulness life. God had to do it himself. So I want to look at Hebrews 11:8 through 10. Because it says, "By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place, which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. But by faith he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. He waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God." So we're going to touch points on three of God's promises that still are in effect today. God will fulfill his promise. God is consistent with the gospel. You will never hear, or if you have a spirit telling you something that's contradicting the gospel, then it's not the correct spirit, because God is always consistent with the gospel. And God is asking us to be patient, because when we're not, then we're doing things in the flesh and we're causing more problems. So I want to close with what I opened with on Abraham. God's loyalty to his covenantal love blesses those who are willing to patiently follow. Hope this sermon kind of helps you shed a little bit of light onto the Abraham story. I suggest everybody kind of go back over that story and see what else you can pull out of there. Next week we will be going into and looking at, I believe, Sarah, Hagar, and Ishmael's story and the conflict that has. So until next week, that's all I got for you guys. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share with friends and family. And always submit to the Word of God. Thank you, and God bless.